stuff to share as well. But, for me, it is incredibly challenging because, again, I've been an executive leader for quite some time, and I interact with every employee in our company. Right now, we're at 438, I believe, total employees. But I get the calls. My title is Vice President of Training and Development. So my job and my responsibility is to interact and connect with employees. But how do you handle those calls when you get those late afternoon calls or even late night calls? And I'll just be very candid. And of course, I can't share about specific employees, but, I've gotten those calls from an employee that, they are on the edge of suicide. They literally, that is what they're talking about. And they're talking about harming themselves. And so how, as a leader, do you not only deal with that individual situation and help coach that individual through so that you're not the last voice they hear on this earth, but then also how does that translate into your family? Because the example that I always like to use is if I was to take this cup, right, or this vessel, and it's filled up to here with water, and then I begin to pour water into it, what's going to happen? The cup's eventually going to overflow. We are no different as human beings when it comes to those emotional thoughts and how we handle and deal with that stress, right? And I think it's even more challenging, and I'm just going to say for Mandy, and I'm not going to speak for you, I'm going to shut up and turn it over to you in a second to talk about this, because I think even as a role in HR, right, it's even more challenging because you are supposed to be that. But then you have conversely, and I'd like for you to talk about both of these aspects. One, managing it at the HR level and interacting with those employees, but then also that kind of taboo of HR. Because people think like HR, I don't want to use the word enemy, but people tend to see HR as, you're not my friend.
No.
So I'm not going to open up. I'm not going to be vulnerable. And so you have to deal with not just the people coming to you, you have to deal with the people not coming to you.
Exactly. Yes, I would. And also oftentimes being looked at as being the subject expert on humans. Right. But human resources. Oh, you're the expert. You've done this for many years. You know what you're doing. I'm sure you've experienced it before. And the reality is I haven't. A lot of it in every situation is different. And I have dealt with a good majority of it and in different situations, but even no situation ever looks the same, right? Because people are so individualized, which is why I love too that we're doing this and having interaction and making it more engagement, because everyone's going to experience things differently. Everyone's going to process differently, interpret differently, manage differently. So it's tools and resources. And I think the best way that we can really collaborate together on mental health and breaking this taboo is by being vulnerable and making it a safe place and realizing that it's going to be different for everybody. There's not a one size fits all.
Yeah. And we're all human.
Yes.
Right.
And unique.
That's it. Unique.
We are very unique. Very unique.
One of the beauties of being human beings is that we are all different. One of the downsides of being human beings is that we are all different.
Which makes it complicated at times.
And how do you deal? And I'll share it because I have no issues being vulnerable. I think it's such a thing that, especially after we've come through this whole COVID era, mental health is just, it's growing. I mean, the number of people that are impacted from a mental health perspective, it's just, it blows me away sometimes when I see the stats and what's happening out there. And I think it's also, as we drill into those, looking at the different levels of mental health issues and the contributing factors. I mentioned anxiety because, there's different levels and different types of anxiety. And understanding that, I think, is so critical to being a leader and being able to not only absorb what your employees might bring into you or the people that you support, but then also in turn, how do you deal with it?
Right.
And I will share an example of, I have somebody that's close to me that definitely very much suffers from anxiety, to the point where this particular individual has had to leave the office at times because the walls are closing in. If those of you that deal with anxiety can relate to that, right? The walls for this individual sometimes close in, and it's all here. Don't get me wrong. It's all right here between the ears. But coaching and leading through that and having conversation and being able to sit down with an individual as a leader, and also, and we go back to that word vulnerable, because having a vulnerable conversation, and for me being able to share with this particular individual that I get it. I suffer from anxiety as well. My anxiety is just different, right? There's that anxiety that this particular individual is dealing with, that she's constantly foreshadowing what's to come. And the things that haven't even yet occurred are impacting her emotionally and physically to the point to where she can't function. That's one level of anxiety. My level of anxiety is like, I get so pent up. I have so much energy that it feels like there's a million tiny explosions going off in my body at one time, to the point to where it literally feels like little bugs are crawling on my bones, right? And I can't function because I'm just like so pent up and my body aches and there's this weird feeling in my bones, right? And I've learned over the years to just breathe through it. But going back to that point of that conversation, for me, being able to be vulnerable with an employee and share with them that, look, I suffer too. Like, we're all human. Here's my example. It may not be the same as yours, but just know that I am also suffering from a level of anxiety. Honestly, it meant all the world to her, for me to be able to open up truthfully. And the episodes and the issues have gotten better because she's learned to kind of take a breath, right? Or she'll come talk to me and we'll sit down and have that conversation, and I create that safe space. We'll tail into like, how do we take that home with us and then deal with our spouses or those others? But I wanted to at least share that example because, again, I think that I'm going to use the word again, vulnerable. Being vulnerable and that vulnerability is such a key, in my opinion, to coaching through and working through some of these mental health issues.
And I completely agree with that. I actually find that very useful in getting people to open up to me as HR, because they do see me not necessarily, I wouldn't say necessarily as the enemy, but I think there's a fear that if I open up and I'm vulnerable and I'm share with you, there's a risk that you're going to need documentation. I'm going to have to share more than what I need to. Now I'm going to have to go through this paperwork. Now there's going to be all this other stuff that comes with HR. And so to really get them to trust and open up, I found being vulnerable and being able to share, hey, you're not alone. And really being able to share my story and my struggle, because similar to so many others, I have anxiety too. And I have things that I've overcome in my story and in my trauma, and I have trauma responses. And so then it's not only managing people who come to me, but then how do I manage those within myself and being vulnerable? And I have those same fears that I don't want to open up and share too much because they can judge me just as much as they fear I'm judging them.
Right.
So how do we make that safe for both of us? And then as a leader, you got to own that, right? And you got to be able to still manage it with them, not take it home, but then make sure that you're also representing the company culture the way that you need to, our policies. I mean, there's all these things that you still have to uphold, but you have to make it vulnerable and safe for them to come to you first. Yeah. And it's not possible without being vulnerable.
It is. And I think, it's even more challenging, and we keep going back to like the leadership, right? And I'm hoping, again, maybe we'll see some interaction in the chat here and you guys can chime in and engage with us, right? But it is so challenging as a leader, especially at the executive level, right? Because again, at least for me, and I'll even share, I had this conversation with our company president a couple of weeks ago. And I'll be honest, I was not in a great headspace. Like, I've had my own stress and things going on in life. And so when you're somebody like myself, where I'm super high energy, I'm super positive the majority of the time, and I'm a million miles an hour, the moment, the millisecond that I am not on point, it is visible, like very visible, right? Because it's either way up here or it's just different. And it reached him that I was, because obviously the way I might have been interacting with other employees here in the company, whatever, it reached him. So we went off site, we sat down and we were just talking, and he actually said it to me, like, you don't get to have bad days. So I posed that question again to everybody, like, when we're not supposed to have bad days and we have people telling us like, you don't get to be off. How do you deal with it? Excuse me, how do you deal with that?
Yeah.
Right. That's a challenge in and of itself. And then let alone now you've got employees coming to you that are also sharing, right? And then you got to go home and interact with your spouse or your kids and love on them when you're just not at 100%. So we all have to have that outlet or that release, because going back to my example of the cup that we're going to overflow, there's a reason the tea kettle whistles when it boils over. And so as individuals, if we don't have a safe space as executives, and one, I will just say thank you to Mandy, because I think she and I have a pretty strong relationship to where we've both shared, right? And so
and I was actually just going to say thank you too, because I use you. I mean, I come in here many times and say, hey, Jesse, it's an off day, right? And we talk, and you have to have that support, I think, in leadership to do that.
Yeah, it is.
So I guess my question for you guys, and thank you for sharing all of that, because as you were talking, I mean, the first thing that came to my mind was, all of the people that are employee level, my first inclination would not want to share that, right? Because I wouldn't want to be looked at as like a less valuable employee, like maybe my personal stuff is going to get in the way of my production, and judged in that aspect. But how do you, I don't want to say how do you make it so that the people below you know that it is a safe space, right? And then also manage you might get a huge wash of people like you have anxiety and you have anxiety and and then you're overwhelmed with Like, we don't have a mental health department, you know, like.
Mhm.
how do you
And we're
deal
not
with that?
professionals.
Yeah, and we're not professionals by no means.
I mean, this is just all of our
should.
experiences and because we're not professionals. So we also have to be careful in that as well.
Yeah, I've
Yeah.
just become a student of people, right?
Mhm.
And I think shameless plug for Steve Scanlon. He wrote a book called Silence the Lizard, and it's just phenomenal. I think it's a really great book. But I think, that's all I've ever done is try to educate myself and interact, because kind of back to your main point there, Amy, it's, one of the things that I strive for very hard here at our company, at least, is, again, I try to interact with as many people as I possibly can on a daily basis. That's where the safe space comes from. When you can build that level of comfort and you can build a true relationship with people where you can truly get them to see that they're not just a number somewhere in an HR system, or, you know what I mean? That they're actually a person of value and that you can understand them. In my opinion, in my experience, that's where the safe space comes into play.
It does. And I would definitely agree with that. I've had, opening up and coming in new to this role just a year and a half, a couple of years ago, I've had several people, as I've helped a few, start coming to me with, hey, I heard that HR has a heart and that you'll listen. And that too, even creates that space just because you help one and then they talk to other people and there's an impact there as well. But I think when they come in, you just have to pretty much just say, hey, just say it and make it safe and say, this is a vulnerable, safe space. There is no judgment here.
Yeah.
I've experienced trauma, and sometimes I'll just go out there and just say, hey, I struggle with the same fears that you have about losing your job or being looked at as less than as an employee. I have as a leadership as too. And I struggle with that too. And there has to be balance in that. Right.
Absolutely.
But you also have to be real, because if you're not real, they know that.
Absolutely.
And you can't impact and help unless you get them.
Yeah, you got to be real. That's
You
it. You have to humanize yourself somehow, some way, and every company is going to be different based on the number of employees you have, the size. I think one of the advantages that we have specifically as a company, something that we do, is we do an intro call in the onboarding journey. So as soon as an offer goes out to a new candidate, they're actually on a one-on-one call with myself, our chief marketing officer. Hopefully we invite their direct managers to join, but that's where I begin to build that foundational relationship. That intro call is so critical, in my opinion. If you have the ability to do something like that in your onboarding journey, I would just strongly encourage it, especially if you're a company that is experiencing high turnover, right? Things like that, because, there's so many outside forces that we have no idea what's impacting people, right? Mm-hmm. And so there's just no room for judgment. And you have to take that approach. And I'll just share with you too. I mean, again, this is coming from me, who is somebody that I was always coached that I lack empathy. Like I never had empathy. I didn't understand what it was. And I will tell you, that's one positive thing that came through COVID. I learned empathy through the COVID era. I am a very calloused, very direct individual. It's just who I am as an individual. And again, we all experience some form of trauma or stress in our lives. My father passed away when I was 18. I spent the next 5 years of my life after that in a dark spot, right? So I understand that. I understand where people are coming from. And we also have to learn that empathy, right? So that we can learn and grow to realize that, man, you have no idea what this person's going through.
No.
I'll share with one of my dearest friends. She grew up in an abusive, alcoholic household. And so anytime she challenged or asked questions that were outside of line, she got smacked. Like, she got beat down, right? And then now as an adult, she runs from challenge. She runs from that conflict, right? And so when we're operating at an executive level and you're supposed to be, quote unquote, in the war room, right? If you didn't know that about this individual and you come at her very aggressively and very strongly, she'll shut down and you lose the best performance you could ever get from that individual. Mm-hmm. Now, she's not going to share that with everybody. I know that because we're really close friends, right? But it's, my point in all of that is truly being able to take a step back and use that empathy, because empathy is a learned skill. Let's understand that. Empathy is not an emotion. It is a learned skill. You have to learn that. Learning that ability to put yourself in somebody else's situation and try to see through their eyes what they're going through. Doesn't mean you're weak, right? For me personally, for a long time, I honestly, that's what I thought when I was younger and growing up, going back to those callous years. I became very calloused as an individual because of the loss of my father, right? I spent 5 years after that to drugs and alcohol and just a very, very dark place. It's one of the reasons why I'm so positive today, truthfully, right? If you don't know, I write a morning blog called The Morning Ascent. There's my shameless plug. I apologize for that. It's not the intent of it, right? But I do that, and I started doing that 13 years ago because that act of writing something positive and that personal development, that personal growth, and feeding my brain with that positivity first thing every morning is what keeps me out of the dark spot. Because I know that dark place that's between this guy's ears, and it's not a fun place. I don't ever want to go back there. So, kind of circling that back around to how do we deal with these things, right? You guys are all probably thinking like, this guy's a head case. Right?
Oh no, I haven't even started.
But it's that experience that we go through in life and grow into that should help us be leaders, in my opinion. But if you're not willing to be vulnerable and let the guard down and share those experiences with other people, in my personal opinion, I don't know how you can really truly help others.
No, and same thing would go with listening. I think opening that same space is also learning to listen, which comes as a learned skill just along with empathy. And I think you can't have the empathy or compassion without fully understanding. And how can you understand if you don't fully listen?
Right.
So I think you have to practice that active listening when your employees come to you or when someone wants to share with you, and let them finish completely. Let them get out their thought and just listen to listen. Don't listen to respond or to fix or have an answer. I think also to, as humans and as leaders, I know for myself personally, I want to fix things. I want to have a solution. I want to make you happy. I want to make everybody happy. I want you to walk out of my office feeling better and not worse. And so sometimes, I find myself, well, why don't you try this? Or why don't you try this? But I haven't even let them finish.
Yeah.
So to really actively listen, I think is also key in having that empathy. And I appreciate you sharing your story and what you've gone through. And I have a lot of the same struggles, and I've opened up and shared with you. And it's really, how do you stay out of that place? How do you not go to that? Because especially, and I really struggled for a long time, especially with HR and leadership, of thinking that there was something wrong with me. And that if they ever found out what I really went through, if I ever told anybody in leadership what I really struggled with, I would be considered as less than or weak, and therefore not capable of doing my job. Right. And it took a long time to really realize that having that voice and finding that power to share your story, even if it's uncomfortable, and then overcoming that fear, because that's really all anxiety is, really is fear. But you overcome that fear and you share your story. It's positive and it takes strength and it's not weakness, and you're helping other people. And when you can impact other people in a positive way, and then they impact people in a positive way, you create such a light and a reaction of people coming together and positive, dealing with the things that are seen so negatively. And you can really change and turn that weakness into power. And I think that's just really, really, really powerful.
Yeah, no, it is. It is. And it's so incredible. And I love the question that just came in. Let me pull it back up here real quick, because I want to jump on that one. What do you do when you open up to others, but then told you talk too much? Find a different audience. I'm being honest. If you are expressing that and somebody says, hey, you're talking too much, I would maybe look for some different outlets, look for some other people that can share. Because to me personally, and no offense to anybody, but if somebody told that to me, then why are you in my life? Like, if you're not willing to listen to me, and your response to me when I'm sharing to you is that I'm talking too much, that's a tough one. That's a real tough situation there. Just being honest. I would hope as leaders, none of us would ever respond that way, especially to an employee or somebody that's in a vulnerable situation. Because, again, I'm going to go back and say, like, I legitimately, guys, I've had not just one, I've had multiple situations where I have received calls from employees where they are literally suicidal. Can you imagine if I ever said that to one of those people? They probably would not be on this planet today. So we have to be mindful, right? We have to be mindful of how we speak with people and talk. This is such a deep rooted topic. I'm struggling for the word to describe it, right?
It is very deep.
It's such a deep emotional topic.
And it's uniquely personal.
It's uniquely personal.
And I think words are very powerful here. I think the words we use when we talk to our employees or the people who come to us, ones, whatever, the words that we use when talking to them, the words that we use to ourselves, what you speak out gives life.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it gives power, and it can literally change your entire perception and thought on something. So listening and being allowed to fully talk. And so I would definitely agree with Jesse there. If someone ever, I take it as an honor when people come and talk to me.
Yeah.
That means they trust me.
Absolutely.
There's a level of trust and respect there. And I would never, and if I never had the time, or if, I would miss a meeting or be late to a meeting before I would do that to somebody, because you can't put a price tag or a value on the impact that can have.
Absolutely. Yeah,
And
absolutely.
you never know how fragile somebody is.
No, you really
totally.
don't.
They
You
might
really
be
don't.
putting on, their best game face, but are shattered inside.
No, and you do impact. I even shared with Jesse when I started here, before I started sharing with him, he didn't know this, but his morning publishing that he does, that he sends out, when I started my job here, I didn't think I could actually do it. I was actually at a point in my life where I had just finished a sabbatical, and I was actually, because of my mental health, contemplating disability and if I could even be a professional. Could I really do this job successfully? I had struggled so much, and I had tried therapy, I had tried medication, I had tried everything, and I had reached a point to where maybe something really is wrong with me. And it was through love coming back into my life from my husband and getting to this new place, and then being put in this job and reading these things. It actually mirrored what I was going through every single day. And I would tell him, you have no idea how on point this is. I started talking in the mirror. I started journaling. I started doing all of the things that he suggested on there. I started looking at things differently. I shared those with my husband, and we would have conversations on them at home.
Wow.
And he would help me through them based off of those, but they were good starting points too. Because sometimes, how do you even communicate this? Not only for someone coming to you and feeling safe, but when you're doing it too, or you come and you need your support. So you go to your leadership counterpart that you can go to for support. Sometimes the stuff sounds so negative and ugly in your head. How do you even get it out?
Right.
Like, where do you even start with that?
Yeah.
But I think that there's a lot of things that people can do to make it safe. You can, share your story. You can listen. There's different tools that people can use, I think, in managing. You just have to find what works for you.
Yeah.
And have those support systems.
Yeah. And I think a couple questions came in. I think they're right on point with the conversation here. How do you decide when the conversation needs to be escalated to a professional? That's such a tough one, right? Because when do you know? I've honestly just kind of used my gut feeling and best judgment. And sometimes it's really hard, because I think we feel like, or maybe we even are, maybe breaching that trust a little bit. If somebody's coming to me and they're having an incredibly vulnerable conversation, and they're like, we'll just use the suicide conversation. How and when do you break that off to say, like, hey, I don't know if I'm qualified to do this, or to have this conversation? It's definitely, I think, a situational and a judgmental call. For me personally, when someone is truly threatening to harm themselves or maybe harm others, or they're really, really what I would consider a bad place, that's when I start referring them over. Or, at least for me, I would push them even over to HR, because that was one of the other questions that came in is, should we direct employees to HR? Like,
Yes.
if I'm not qualified. Definitely, if you feel like you're not qualified. But what I want to say inside of that feeling of not qualification there, remember, we're all human beings. There's no magic playbook in life that tells us how to be successful. We learn and grow through experience. So while in your head you may not feel qualified, you've survived life to the point that you're at today. In my opinion, that makes you somewhat qualified to hear and listen to what anybody has to say. Because we've all taken different twists and turns. We've all had experiences. And even if you drill it down into kind of some specifics and look at PTSD, right? There's a big difference between post-traumatic stress disorder and post-traumatic stress. We've all had something in life that has occurred, whether it was a death of a near and dear family member, an injury, a car accident. We've all experienced something in life that has created post-traumatic stress for us. The differentiator is the disorder. Is it something that is recurring and continuing, and is it running so deep that you do need help or even medication in some cases to overcome? Right. And so, Nancy, I don't know if that's helpful to your question there, of that feeling of not qualified. Again, I think it's more of a judgment call. And if you really feel like, hey, I'm not actually going to probably help you anymore, I may actually even hurt you by what I have to say, then I would definitely, direct that over. But I'm going to go back to what Mandy said. Just because somebody is an HR doesn't mean that they are the expert. It doesn't mean that she has any more skills. That HR certification, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't want to go down a wrong path here, but it's not giving you a psychological degree.
No,
it's not telling you how to deal with the human psyche. You're dealing with human resources laws and regulations.
Exactly.
And how much do I have to pay in the state of Colorado for minimum wage, right?
No, it
course,
is.
I mean,
it is. And you get the experience that you gain through the life experiences, through anything else. But what I can offer is that everybody is qualified to be nice. Everybody is qualified to listen. And that's really all this takes. You don't have to, as a leader, have the answers. It is very safe to say, hey, thank you for coming to me. I appreciate you being vulnerable. I do not know how to respond to you. Please don't take that personally. I want to make sure that I'm impacting you correctly. I think this is really important. There is no judgment here. Reassure them with that it's safe. But maybe let's get you to HR because I feel like you need resources that I can't provide you.
Yeah.
And then when they come to me, I tell everyone I'm not a professional, and whether I feel like they need it or not, I offer our EAP, I offer counseling, I give them suggestions to always reach out to others, but to know that they can always come and talk.
Yeah.
And I may not always have the right words, but all I can do is share my experiences when it comes to this, because we're not professionals. Even as HR and leadership, we're not experts in this topic, but we are experts in being human, and we all know what we've been through.
Yeah.
And we've all experienced some kind of trauma in our lives. And sometimes it's just sharing that too, that, can really make an impact so they don't feel alone.
I think so. And I think it's, and I've even said it to people, I'll be honest, like I don't have a great answer.
Mm-mm.
I mean, I just straight up will tell people, like, I'll be 100% honest with you. I don't have a great answer. I wish I did. I wish I had something more that I could tell you or share with you. I don't have a great solution. Just know that I'm here for you. I will always listen. I will do whatever I can to support you.
Mm-hmm.
And, if you need some additional help, we should maybe get you over to HR, or, let's see if we can't get you some support some other way. But, again, I'm always here. And that's typically how I would frame it, because I've been in that situation as well of,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm not, all I know is what I've lived. Right?
Exactly. We know our experiences. We know what we've gone through and how we've healed and come from our trauma. And it's always reoccurring. I mean, I also think this is one of those things that it looks different over time. I think that you learn and you grow through your experiences, and things that worked for me 2 years ago don't work for me today.
Right.
I actually had something come over this weekend because I have this habit of going into irrational cycles, as I call them, and bad ways of thinking that just kind of feed and you don't ever really get out of them. And they're really hard because for me, they're very physical at first. And it does feel like the world's crawling in, and I have to turn down the music to see, so to speak, because it's like sensory overload. And they're so uncomfortable. But it's ironic that all of this is happening because in part of my story, my mom was a huge part of my trauma. And she was a drug addict and an alcoholic, and she suffered from bipolar and a lot of mental health issues as well. So I grew up with that as a child, and I learned a lot of those behaviors. And so it took me a long time to realize what's the product of environment versus what's really going on in my head. Even with mental illness,
distinction. Though,
right? What is truly a mental illness and what is truly learned behaviors, because maybe that's something that's all you know. And so then how can you reverse it, and what can you work with? And that's where you really have to get into that professionals. But ironically, today is my mom's birthday. And she actually, being very vulnerable here, committed suicide. It'll be 9 years in September. And so that came up for me this weekend, and all of those emotions and all of those feelings and all of those triggers. But then I'm like, wow, you know what? You don't ask for things to happen to you, but you get through them and you overcome them and you become better. And then you can share and impact and help other people grow and not feel alone in those things. And I actually think it's ironically wonderful that today is her birthday for me in my personal journey and where I'm going, because I feel like the world's given me so much back that I want to help others. And so this is just such a great platform. And, even outside of here, you guys, I'll give you guys my email. Please, Amy, send out my contact stuff. If you guys have questions, you have a specific situation that you want to talk through, but don't really want to put it out here, we're not professionals, but we're support, and we can help each other get through and get some ideas and go from there.
And at the end of the day, like I said, we're all humans. It is a takeaway, because I think we're coming up on time.
Yes.
Please correct me if I'm wrong. And my superpower is running my mouth, so you just wind me up.
Yes, and please, you guys interact, because I could share my stories forever, and it's not just about me or Jesse. This is to help you guys as well. And
I will share that takeaway is if you don't journal, I would just encourage you to engage in that practice. Right. There's that old saying, you should always have two books with you at all times, the one you're reading and the one you're writing. And I think that act of journaling, at least for me, because that was kind of one of the points of today's conversation was, how do we as leaders decompress ourselves, right? How do we as leaders stand up to supporting everybody around us, but then also deal with what we have internally. Journaling is a big piece of that for me personally.
Yes, and me as well. That's actually what I did all day Saturday was I journaled through all of this stuff and actually trying to be really ready for today too.
Yeah, and the great thing about
that's
journaling,
super valuable.
Yeah.
And I was I'm glad you guys came around to that, because that's what I was going to say. It's like, so like your example, Jesse, when you went to your boss and said you're not allowed to have a bad day, you know, meanwhile we're saying, you know, to our employee or to your employees, you're allowed to have a bad day. Talk to me about it. So when you get to that level, like, and you were basically stopped right there. He wasn't saying like, you know, tell me what's going on with you so that we can work past it. Like, what did you do? You know, were you just like, how did you handle that?
Yeah, I for the most part, I sucked it up, to be honest with you. I mean, I in my head recognize that, yeah, I mean, I don't. And it's something that I believe in that same philosophy, right? As a leader, I'm supposed to be that rock and I don't get to have bad days. That's part of being able to show up every day. And as you walk in the door, it might be the crappiest drive into the office, but as soon as that door opens and I click through, you know, you gotta, it's game time, right? I will go back though, Amy, to your direct question of the journaling, right? A lot of it is journals. And one of the beauties about journaling, right, is you might not have anything but the big 4-letter FUCK word on here with big exclamation marks, right? But the beauty is you get to turn the page and it's a whole new story.
Yep. And I love that.
Right. And as soon as you turn that page, it's a blank slate and you can create whatever story and journey you want in life. I firmly believe that. And so that's a big piece of me, right? That just that journaling, that writing every day and being able to power through. And I will also go back to kind of your question, Amy, of how do I get through it? I have an amazing support system within my wife. She's the rock, right? Not everybody has that though.
No.
Because not everybody's spouse wants to hear about the day and then you come home and you have to unload all of that stress and it's got to go somewhere, right? I have a great support structure and system within my wife, as well as I have some amazing friends and peers that I am able to be open and vulnerable with, right? To be able to have those conversations. I think that's the critical component to it, is making sure that you have people in your life that truly will listen and aren't going to say you talk too much, right? And truly just let you get it out. Because honestly, at the end of the day, sometimes that's all that you need. Like literally the tea kettle example, right? You just got to vent. You just got to get it out. Whether it's going out in the parking lot and screaming at the top of your lungs, whether it's climbing to the top of the mountain and sitting under a tree and crying your eyes out, whatever works for us as individuals, I think that's a big piece of it as well. That outlet, that release.
It is. And I love the journaling. That's actually what I use too. I think journaling can look different for everybody. For me, I start my journaling as actually throughout the day. I like to start off the morning with an affirmation of this is what I woke up with. This is what's on my heart. And I just put down my affirmation for the day. And then through the days, as things come up and what I would call triggers or moments is whatever may be that initiates whatever, you can write it down and it can just be the FUCK word really loud that you just have to write down real quick to get it out, or it can be whatever you need at that moment. But I carry my journal with me and I journal all day long. For me, one of the other things that helps me get through this because of my anxiety and stuff that's been really impactful for me is talking in the mirror. And again, it's that words you use and changing the words you use, but talking to yourself and pumping yourself up, because I very much come from old school. I'm very much the same way as Jesse. I don't believe I can have a bad day. I feel as a leader, I'm supposed to have this perception and this persona and be seen a certain way. And that's, I'm bulletproof and you got to get out there and you got to do it. And the minute that you're not, it's that weakness comes along and then it's like, dang, I feel weak, but you're not. And then you got to work through it yourself. So journaling is huge.
Self-talk, affirmations,
yes.
that's a whole nother topic and conversation.
The journaling is huge. Yeah.
Journaling is huge.
I want to get into that too, because that was extremely impactful for you, Mandy. I mean, even with weight loss and I mean, I think about that all the time. On one of our prep calls, she shared with me how she talks to herself in the mirror. And I struggle with my weight. I've always struggled with my weight. I'm like that, my sister's wedding's in 2 weeks. I was going to lose 50 pounds. I think I probably gained 3 pounds because in my head, this is what I'm supposed to do. This is what I want to do. But then there are times that I'm just like, you know what? I don't care. My dress fits. It's fine. I don't need to lose all the weight. Like I'm still going to be pretty. It's okay. But that bad voice inside of me is like, you're going to be fat. You're going to look horrible. You're going to, all these horrible things. But I think about what you said to me a lot, and I haven't done it. Like I haven't gone to the mirror and said nice things.
It's hard. It's hard. I cried. I cry every time.
How much weight did you lose?
120 pounds.
120 pounds, you guys, just by saying nice things to herself in the mirror. I mean, I'm sure with other stuff, but
No, it was a combination of that. And I have a wonderful support system too at home with my husband. And I was in a safe environment that I've never been in before as well. But it was really the mirror. I didn't go into it wanting to lose weight. It wasn't in fact, I was tired of nutritionists. I had just canceled my gym membership, was like, you know what, you're going to learn to love yourself. I don't care what it takes. And I started talking in the mirror and it just happened.
I love it.
It's so I'm
Love yourself. That's the key words right there, learning to love yourself in that message.
Mm-hmm.
And the question came in, what happens if you don't have a support system? Oh, you got to find one.
You do.
I'm here. You can call
Same
me
here.
anytime. Seriously, I'm being 100% candid.
Yes.
Anybody on this call, you have me, you've got Mandy. We will be your support structure. I promise.
Anytime.
Just be careful what you sign up for, because I will keep you incredibly accountable.
And I will share. And I do talk too much.
Yeah.
Let everybody know.
My superpower's running my mouth. I already said that much, but but yeah, if you don't have a support structure, we got to find you one and seek one out, because it's just nobody can succeed alone. I don't care what anybody says. If anybody out there tells you that they can succeed all on their own and do it all by themselves, they're lying. They are lying to you, and they're lying to themselves. It's not going to happen.
No.
The most successful people on this planet will tell you they are successful because of the people that they're surrounding themselves with. Like, there's just no question about that.
And I will concur and shout that as well. When I started this job, again, I shared with you guys, I didn't think I could do it. And I feel like today I am empowered and can do it, and where I am because of the people I work with. I am truly blessed to work with such a great group of leadership, and none of them know how much they impact me on a daily basis, and how much I learn from them, and how much just their being kind and their word of encouragement has truly changed my life.
It's just being a good human, right?
It is just being a good human at the end of the
Absolutely.
day. And we're all qualified and have the experience to just be a good human.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I agree. And empathy too, as you guys were talking, also thinking, I often have empathy for my leaders. I mean, we just got a new president and COO, and she hops on these calls, and I know she's trying to meet. I mean, she has a goal of literally having a call and meeting with all 250 plus members of our collaborative before we go to Nashville in September. That's a tall order. And
yes.
so, my automatic response is like, how are you doing? Like, what do you need? I want to let her know that, like, we get it. Like, this is a lot to come into, because we're all just going about our regular day to day, but she's got to, like, figure out how this machine works, what she's going to do to improve it. It's a lot. I'm sure it's a lot. And then also, meeting all of us and our personalities and where we stand in our roles. So I think it's also important as employees to show some empathy to the leaders that are trying so hard to, to do their job, So but you have that mutual empathy back and forth, then you've got a great situation. The other thing I wanted to say was, you mentioned EAP. Bob Hamilton also said his company has employee assistance programs. TMC is a smaller company. We don't have something like that, but I think, obviously people signed up for this because they wanted to know, leadership and mental health and how that, goes together. But I'm sure there are some organizations that just have the guy on the top or that really aren't empathetic people. And so it's the buck stops with them. And so, for those people, are they going to retrain themselves or learn how to be empathetic, or should they find someone like, look, I'm not going to be the guy that you come to, but let's get somebody in place. Let's get a department in place, or HR, or someone that, like, it's like you said, you're very honest about, you're just a very craft, straightforward person. Well, there's plenty of those leaders out there, right? That their employees don't feel like they can come to them. And if you're on this call and you are in a leadership role and you know that that's the situation in your organization, then maybe consider an EAP, or consider having that, that resource for people in your organization. So
yeah, I think it's so critical. And there's that old school mentality, right? That what Mandy said earlier is mental health is a weakness, and it's not. Like, it's something we all have to deal with as humans, and we all deal with it differently. I don't care what anybody says. I will challenge anybody that we all deal with some level of form of some type of mental health, whether it's a slight level of depression, the anxiety, the body dysmorphia,
the trauma responses, whatever it may be.
Whatever it might
be. Because we're talking about it more now.
Yes, we are.
It seems like there's more of it. It's always existed. We've just always been taught to push it down and just perform, and you go home and yeah.
Yeah, I had the opportunity to be on a podcast a while back with a retired lieutenant colonel in the Marine Corps. He actually helped create the MARSOC unit which is the Marine Special Forces. And talking about vulnerability with this guy and going down this path was just such a blessing and an incredible experience for me personally, right? Because again, here's a Marine, here's a lieutenant colonel in the Marine Corps that is building special forces. This guy is meant to be a killing machine, literally. I mean, that's his job. And then he starts talking about PTSD and you know, they're not allowed to be vulnerable. So how do you deal that's a struggle that we're all going to deal with. And, you know, we might have some of those retired Marine colonels or whoever they are running our companies, right? And they don't know any different, I guess is the place that I'm going. And so it's up to us, I think, as individuals and leaders to rally around. Going back to where you're saying, if you have a leader that doesn't want to listen, maybe you need to be that person that listens. Maybe you need to collaborate with your peers within your company and create that safe space. I mean, I'm not telling you guys what to do, but it's just it's such a big deal, guys. It really is.
It really is, not only for your staff and employees that come to you, but for you and yourself as leaders, and how we manage that, and then how we take it home, and then also how we manage it up to our leaders. And, you know, for me, how do I manage myself so that way I'm still doing my job the way that I need to as well. And so I think it's just a beautiful thing. And I would really encourage, there wasn't as much interaction as I think we were really hoping for, but if you guys have stories, questions, or things, or interest even before next time, please shoot us an email. Ask us. We can always come back to this topic with stuff if you guys think of anything. We, you know, really want to help, and the more collaborative we can get with you guys, the better that will be.
Yeah, we're here to help you. And I would say,
I'll send out, so with the follow-up email, the recording of this, I will give you guys your email addresses, and also the link to Jesse's blog. I mean, that the morning affirmation, if you want to just use that as a springboard to, you know, and you can see what he sends out to his employees every day. And that's something that Mandy grasped, you know, on a daily basis and really looked into it, talked to, you know, to her husband about it. They're fantastic, and they're just great. It's a great way to start your morning.
It is, and they're short, and they're just wonderful.
They're short, exactly. And so do you guys want to talk real quick about what so the next session is going to be in, it's July, August. And it'll be an arm of this, right, where we're just moving down the road a little bit more. So I'll send the link to that as well. But if you guys want to just sort of give a quick preview on what we'll be talking about next month.
Yeah, I'd love to dive into a little bit more specifics, to be honest with you. I'd love to dive into the kind of those different levels of, you know, is it anxiety? Is it depression? Is it body dysmorphia? I'd love to maybe dive into some of those a little bit more granular topics, but kind of keep it at the same thing of like, how do we deal with this stuff, right? And what are some of the signs? I'd love to talk about that as well. Like, how
what do you guys see?
How can you recognize these, right? And I'd love your input too. Please tell us what you'd like to hear about and where you'd like to go as well, because we could flow pretty good. And like I said, my superpower truly is running my mouth. And this is a topic that I'm incredibly passionate about.
Mine too. Having
lived through some of these things myself, and again, learning empathy and recognizing and being more in tune with what's happening in the world out there. Just, I'm blown away.
So once you get it off your chest and once you talk about it, it just gets easier and easier every time.
It does. Overcoming that fear. And it becomes
no shame in my game anymore either. And I'm, you know, I take medication, and I tell everybody, if you haven't tried it or you need to, I mean, there's other ways to you know, there's a million different ways that you can manage your anxiety. I mean, there's even foods that you can eat that are better, right? Or menopause. I'm going through menopause.
So I would even love to hear
that would help with my menopause. You know?
No, for totally. It does. But I would really love to hear from you guys, even before we dig in next time or during the in-between. What are some things that you guys experience where you're working or that you need help with, or that has come to you that maybe we can touch on next time and bring some awareness to?
Yeah, absolutely. Email me myself. I can forward them to Jesse and Mandy. But this is awesome, you guys. I mean, I'm not surprised, because I knew our conversations prior to this call it was amazing. So I think lots of great comments in the chat for you. Thank you. Everything was great. You guys are amazing. So sounds like you did a pretty good job.
Yeah, thank you. I'm glad there's value.
You didn't screw it up.
Well, I'm glad there was value. And again, guys, I'll just put it out there too. We're here. I mean, I'm just being honest. I mean, we all have companies to run. We all have those things, but I am here. And if I can help you in any way, shape, or form, please do not hesitate to reach out to me. I will always be an ear, even if it's, again, just you got a vent. I'm a pretty good listener. So
he is. I can concur that.
Thank you guys so much. Look out for that follow-up email coming at you later today or tomorrow, and we'll see you next month.
Awesome. Thanks,
everyone.
guys. Appreciate you guys.
Good job.